Recording from inside an unapproved backyard tool shed where the HOA hasn't caught on to his unsanctioned wind chimes yet, it's your host, Donovan.
Welcome back to Deep Dives in the Shallow End, the podcast where we wade through the ornamental koi pond of American life and hope we don't get fined for using the wrong shade of mulch. I'm your not-so-expert host, Donovan, and today we're diving into the world of Homeowners Associations, a place where the only thing scarier than unchecked power is the number of pages in the community handbook. Imagine a neighborhood where the grass is always greener, because if it isn't, a committee of your neighbors will fine you into bankruptcy and send you and your above-ground sprinklers straight to the gulag. A land where democracy goes to die, but the hydrangeas are premium and the mailbox colors are strictly regulated. It's not Mayberry, it's Animal Farm with matching shutters. Today, we're exploring the Suburban Stalinist Shangri-La of every sinister Stasi Stepford wife as enforced by the local HOA, those mini-governments where everyone gets a vote as long as they own the property, don't rent, and have the patience to sit through a 4-hour meeting about the font size on street signs. So, pour yourself something strong, preferably not in a cup visible from the curb, and strap in. We're about to find out what happens when Americans, drunk on the illusion of freedom, decide to voluntarily build their own bureaucratic Bastille, one beige vinyl fence at a time.
Deep dives in the shallow end. Deep dives in the shallow end.
Let's peel back the artificial turf and see what's fertilizing these abominations. Picture it. Early 20th century America, before TikTok addiction, before the soul-evaporating HOA Facebook group that just reported seeing a black youth in a hoodie walking through the neighborhood. Shelter in place, people. This is code red. Back then, the community association meant that your neighborhoods collectively shunned you for letting your pig run wild through the victory cabbage or not being Baptist. Proto-HOAs popped up in wealthy enclaves that wanted to keep the poor, the Catholic, or God forbid, the potato-breathed Irish out of their carriage paths. But the HOA as we know it, that Frankenstein's monster gets its jolt of life in post-World War II suburbia Levittown, 1947. Imagine, thousands of identical houses mass-produced for returning soldiers. The American dream, just as long as you follow the rules. Early HOAs not only regulated lawn height, they regulated people. Want a house? Put your arm up next to this paper bag. Okay, nice and pale. Good. Now, how closely do you associate with the likes of Christine Jorgensen? Because, trans people were not as lovingly embraced back then as they are today. Good. Nice and straight. Good. Finally, can you spell the word covenant? Okay, you're in. Welcome to the neighborhood. Here's your armband. By the 1960s, the HOA spreads like crabgrass at a Baptist potluck. Why? Because the government got in on the action. The FHA and VA encouraged developers to form HOAs as a condition for mortgage insurance, pushing investments into these perfect little enclaves and away from the dirty, diverse city. Fast forward to the present, and we've gone from a few hundred HOAs in the 1960s to over 365,000. That's 75 million Americans living under the watchful gaze of Janet from the Landscape Committee. May God have mercy on your soul if you dare plant non-ornamental shrubbery in Zone 4. Of course, every utopia has its dark side. Early HOAs literally wrote racism and classism into their covenants. Some even banned people by race, ethnicity, or religion. Shout out to the Supreme Court, who in 1948 finally ruled that no Jews, no blacks, no fun was in fact a constitutional faux pas. But don't worry, the exclusion didn't stop, it just got fancier. Instead of saying you can't live here, HOAs started saying you just can't afford to live here. There it is. That's the sweet smell of America. So why does it taste like pennies? So, the next time you see a perfectly trimmed hedge, just remember those boxwoods are fertilized by a history of exclusion, conformity, and the kind of soul-sucking homogeneity that would make even Strom Thurmond say, you know what, maybe a little color isn't so bad. But let's talk about how these mini-governments operate. If the city council is a clown car, the HOA board is the clown car's HOA-mandated, regulation-compliant, taupe-colored cousin brother powered by entitlement, arbitrariness, and just enough Viagra and Geritol to power the post-shuffleboard shenanigans. HOAs are, by design, private governments. When the developer finishes building the subdivision, they hand the reins to a board of directors, a cabal of your neighbors who probably have at least one job title that includes the word enforcement. These folks are elected by the property owners, not the residents, so if you rent, you might as well be a leper on a particularly heavy shedding day. The rules? Oh, they run with the land, like a curse in a Gothic novel or an STI at a sandals resort. Officially, they're called CC&Rs, Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. In practice, they're 50-page, choose-your-own-adventure pamphlets where every choice leads to fines, shame, and at least 3 angry emails from some cold witch whose full-time job it is to ruin my life. Well, thanks. Now I have 2 moms, apparently. But not the cool kind who would have given me a gender-neutral name and gifted me a kombucha SCOBY for my 6th grade graduation from a progressive Waldorf school. Boards have near total authority over everything that makes life miserable: the color of your house, the height of your fence, the number of pets, the velocity of your holiday joy. This is democracy, but for people who get horny for Robert's Rules of Order, especially the ones who really want to lay it on the table, which in this context is less about spontaneous HOA orgies and more about delaying any actual decisions until everyone is dead or asleep. In other words, procedural edging. And if you violate the rules, prepare for fines, legal threats, and if you're really unlucky, the possibility of foreclosure. That's right. The folks who can't agree on whether your yard flamingo is seasonally appropriate can legally take your home. In some states, the HOA can do this without even going to court. America, the only country where your home can be seized by a committee that couldn't organize a bake sale without a parliamentary crisis akin to that of the People's Budget of 1911. But don't worry. Meetings are open to all members, so long as you've completed the proper forms, submitted a written request, and promised not to question old Gert's authority. And let's talk about what makes an HOA tick: the rules. Not the fun kind, like don't let your pet alligator use the pool, looking at you, Florida, but the endless, soul-erasing Kafkaesque regulations that govern everything from the shade of your garage to the angle at which your Halloween skeleton may recline. Common restrictions? Well, let me introduce you to the garbage-filled, tepid mess of a bylaw buffet that is only topped by Golden Corral. Mandatory neutral paint, government-mandated grass length, fence material that makes the Berlin Wall look welcoming, and a ban on lawnmower gnomes unless they are wearing seasonally appropriate hats. Your home is your castle, as long as the HOA committee has approved the color of the drawbridge and you agree not to fly any flags unless they're for the local high school marching band or an American flag from back when Truman was in office. You know, before the whole Brown v. Board of Education debacle. But what happens if you color outside the lines? Enter the HOA enforcement gauntlet. It starts with passive-aggressive letters, friendly reminders that is, then ramps up to fines, legal threats, and finally the nuclear option, placing a lien on your home. If you still won't kowtow to the board, they can escalate to foreclosure faster than you can demand a quorum. And don't think you'll get away with anything cute, like an unauthorized Star of David during the Christmas holiday season. In some states, your HOA can take your house for less than the price of a premium Costco membership. Consider the Texas soldier whose home was foreclosed on and auctioned off for $3,500, over $800 in unpaid dues. This, mind you, while he was deployed in Iraq. Because we're going to support the troops, up until the point that their arrears are just older than the lifespan of a mayfly, or they have a dandelion in their yard. Then when they get back home, it's like, hey, sorry about your leg, but thanks for your service. Oh, and we threw out all your shit, but we saved you an application for government housing. And this was in Texas, the promised land. I can't imagine what they do to you in one of those freedom-hating states like California. Of course, the level of sadism varies by area. Some require a judicial process before you're left homeless by the Decorative Rock Placement Committee, while others hand the HOA a set of bolt cutters and a bullhorn. But across the board, the power imbalance is very real. You versus a committee of amateur tyrants with too much time, a legal fund, and a spreadsheet of everyone's most minor transgressions. When Kafka wrote about the trial, he just hadn't met Janet from the architectural committee yet. Joseph K. thinks he got off easy at this point. Here's where it gets extra American. HOAs aren't just about taupe paint and militant mailbox placement. They're about building little fortresses of privilege. If you ever wondered what would happen if the Volksgemeinschaft, the people's community under one of the more popular Reichs, had a credit check and a burning fear of Section 8, well, welcome home. From the jump, HOAs were designed to keep out the undesirables, which is polite suburbia speak for anyone not white, not straight, not wealthy, not Protestant, or, God forbid, not a season ticket holder for the high school football team. Early covenants were subtle. No Jews, no Catholics, no black families, no food spicier than mayo. And if you were Irish, please exit through the potato cellar. After the Supreme Court nixed explicit racial covenants, HOAs switched tactics, out with the no coloreds, in with the no rentals, minimum square footage, and mandatory background checks. Because only the best communities require a net worth, family gold best kept in a Swiss bank vault, and the genealogical background check that goes back to the Magna Carta. If you ain't part of the Longshakes bloodline, then there's really nothing we can do for you. I'm so sorry about that. It's not just about race anymore, though, let's be honest, it's still about race. HOAs are also about property values, keeping the riffraff out. The tools have changed. Now it's credit score minimums, HOA interviews, and rules against, say, more than 2 unrelated people living in a home, aka no roommates, no immigrants, and certainly no polycules. Stats? Well, a 10% increase in HOA homes in metro areas associated with a 2% increase in black-white segregation. Welcome to the land of the free as long as you can clear escrow and your family tree won't cause any next-door forum drama. HOAs promise paradise but deliver a privatized police state with a book club. At the end of the day, your lawn may be green, but your social circle is somehow simultaneously beige and bright white. And you better like it that way, or the social committee will have some questions about your non-traditional gatherings of what we can only assume are jazz enthusiasts. Now, before the old crone from the HOA Facebook group threatens to fine me for bias, let's admit, HOAs aren't all doom, gloom, and Kafkaesque foreclosure threats. Sometimes the grass is greener, and not just because of chemical runoff from the golf course. First, the benefits. You get amenities. Tennis courts, walking trails, gated security, and the kind of playground equipment that's just safe enough for your middle child. The streets are usually clean, the Christmas lights stay competitive but managed, and a communal pool that is only occasionally shut down for biological incidents. And in some places, property values do stay higher, mostly because people can't afford to leave. For some, HOAs actually work. The rules keep the place looking nice, and if you're a fan of passive-aggressive power plays, there's no greater thrill than catching your neighbor with an unapproved mailbox or a sagging stars and stripes. The social events mean you could build a community, or at least network with other people who own the same model of gas grill. Yes, some HOAs are even inclusive, functional, and run by actual humans instead of failed high school hall monitors with hard-ons for handing out humiliation. Sometimes the board president is even someone you'd want to have a drink with, and sometimes the amenities really do improve lives. Community centers that double as cooling shelters during heat waves or pools that give local kids a safe place to be loud and dangerously chlorinated. But let's not kid ourselves. Behind every well-maintained park is a seething cauldron of next-door posts, a running list of fines, and at least one person who treats the bylaws like the Bible. You know, picking out the bits that suit them at the moment while discarding the rest like so much loving thy neighbor. Paradise has a price, and the HOA is ready to invoice you for every last goddamn red cent. But even in this Stepford fever dream, resistance festers. For every Janet with a color wheel and a coral, there's a neighbor just itching to put a 12-foot Home Depot skeleton in the yard or start a private Facebook group calling for a revolution that would make Robespierre clutch his pearls. And that resistance is real. Neighbors running for the board on platforms of basic human decency, lawsuits challenging the most fascist rules, entire blocks banding together to change covenants. There are TikTokers posting quote-unquote HOA audit videos, and local papers running a quote-unquote meet your neighborhood tyrant exposés. The HOA's greatest enemy is the resident who learns the rules, gets on the board, and starts weaponizing the bylaws right back. It's the American way. If you can't beat them, join them, then change the lock on the clubhouse door. And said resistance is for good reason. I already mentioned the Texas soldier stationed in Iraq whose bravery and sacrifice were repaid with his house foreclosed upon for dues that couldn't buy a PS5 on the black market. But there was also the couple who lost their home for planting drought-resistant succulents instead of the board-mandated bluegrass. Only in America can wanting to keep your catchments from catastrophic compaction have you thrust into the street with the delicacy of Willem Slavata. Thanks a lot, Hatbergs. Apparently creeping on your little sister was cool, but religious freedom was a bridge too far. So out the window you go. So those HOAs better be careful, because the next time they send out a notice about improper garage lighting, they may be inadvertently fomenting their own Shays rebellion. In the end, HOAs are the American dream with a side of paperwork, a lot of surveillance, and the ever-present threat of bureaucratic blowback. They promise a world of perfectly manicured lawns and neighborly bonhomie, but sometimes deliver purgatory where your freedom is filtered through a 40-page flyer filled with the fateful findings of a fanatical faction of Philistines who follow Robert's Rules of Order like foundational philosophy for their fiery fellowship. HOAs give you the illusion of security, the comfort of conformity, and the constant low-level anxiety of wondering if you're about to get fined for your choice of festive door wreath. They are a reminder that in America, you're free to pursue happiness as long as it's board approved. I have hope for the youth, though, assuming they ever have the chance to buy. This is the exact kind of anachronistic, self-important, vaguely racist, classist, elitist BS they seem to despise. Maybe the next generation of residents will decide that a little plastic rebellion is worth more than a pristine picket fence. That it's okay if the grass is a little uneven or if someone paints their door a radical color like red. Maybe in the end, paradise isn't a place, but rather a process. And sometimes that process starts with a single, defiant tuft of tussock grass and an exceedingly good lawyer. Anyway, thanks for joining me on this tour of Suburban Stalinism. Until the next episode, take care of yourselves and others, even your annoying neighbors whose dogs or worse, kids just won't shut up. I hope you'll join me on the next one.
Deep dives in the shallow end. deep dives in the shallow end.